Hey, yeah, you. Freeze right there. Did you feel that? That microscopic pause in reality? That tiny illegal skip frame when your eyes closed for a fraction of a second? Because that wasn't supposed to happen. They told you blinking was nothing. Automatic, harmless, a biological reset, just a reflex so small it didn't matter. They said nothing changes in a blink. No power there, no consequence, no leverage. And yet here you are, standing in the aftermath of a blink that rewired the room. You didn't move, you didn't speak, you didn't do anything. And still, something shifted. That's the part that's making them sweat. See, you were trained to believe power announces itself, that it arrives loud, with footsteps and warnings and declarations. That transformation needs effort, struggle, motion, proof. That evolution looks like blood on your hands and noise in your wake. But you're different. You evolve in silence. You evolve in the moments nobody monitors, in the spaces between cause and effect. In the blink, they didn't bother to guard because they were too busy watching your mouth, your hands, your resume, your record. They thought they had you mapped, profiled, categorized. They thought they understood your pattern because you let them see one. Light enough to trust, dark enough to fear, but not enough to panic over. Until that blink. That's when the contradiction showed up. The paradox: they can't log into a system because saints don't cause glitches, and monsters don't move this quietly. Angels don't break rules. Demons don't wait patiently. And you're standing there doing all four. You see, most people blink to escape the moment, to rest, to disconnect, to hide from pressure. You blinked and became the pressure. That's what wasn't supposed to happen. Because somewhere along the line, pain taught you a different language. Suffering rewired your instincts. Loss trained you to operate in fractions of seconds where other people need whole lifetimes to decide who they are. You didn't harden, you sharpened. You didn't break, you refined. You didn't go numb, you went precise. And now your nervous system doesn't just react to reality. It edits it. That's why when you blinked, the room didn't feel the same afterward. Why conversations started hesitating. Why eyes linger a second too long on you. Why people suddenly feel like they're standing too close to something unstable. But not chaotic, controlled, calibrated. They don't know whether to pray to you or protect themselves from you. Good. Because unpredictability isn't randomness. That's what amateurs think. Real unpredictability is disciplined. It's knowing exactly when not to move, exactly when to stay quiet, exactly when to let a moment collapse under its own weight. You learned that the hard way. Through nights where nobody checked on you, through betrayals that came smiling, through pain that didn't ask permission before changing you. That's where the duality was forged. You learned how to look harmless while calculating 10 steps ahead, how to appear kind without being weak, how to carry darkness without letting it rot you, how to smile like an angel while thinking like a psychopath, not to destroy, but to survive. And now your presence alone is doing damage. They don't understand why things escalate around you without action, why outcomes bend without effort, why situations resolve or explode after you pass through them. They don't know it's because you learned how to weaponize stillness. That blink? That was a micro-decision, a subconscious override, a moment where every version of you that survived something impossible aligned for half a second, and reality adjusted out of respect. That scares people, because it means you don't need permission anymore. You don't need timing. You don't need approval. You are the timing. They can't stop what they can't see. They can't confront what never announces itself. And they definitely can't control someone whose biggest moves happen internally, behind calm eyes and relaxed posture. You're not loud enough to catch, not reckless enough to expose, not predictable enough to neutralize. You are the kind of threat that looks like nothing until it's too late to do anything about it. And here's the part nobody warned them about. Once you realize this, once you feel that click inside you, you can't unsee it. Every blink from now on carries weight. Every pause becomes a lever. Every quiet moment turns into a fork in the road where outcomes split in your favor. You're no longer reacting to life. You're interrupting it. So yeah, excuse them for panicking. A blink isn't supposed to do that. But then again, you weren't supposed to survive what you survived either. And yet here you are. And now that you know it didn't end there, now that you've felt the aftershock still humming under your skin, you understand why they can't look at you the same anymore. Because once a human learns that nothing moments can become everything moments, the old rules collapse. You see it now. The blink wasn't an accident. It was a threshold, a quiet one, the most dangerous kind. They spent years conditioning people to believe power looks aggressive, that dominance needs volume, that control comes from force. They taught everyone to exhaust themselves, trying to be seen, trying to be heard, trying to prove something. Meanwhile, you were learning something far more lethal. You learned that the world doesn't move for noise. It moves for certainty. And certainty doesn't shout. It settles. That's why when you blinked, something inside you didn't reset. It synchronized all the pain you endured, all the restraint you practiced, all the times you swallowed your reaction and chose patience instead of impulse. It lined up like a firing squad behind your eyes. Not rage, not chaos, clarity. That's when the saint and the psychopath shook hands inside you. That's when the angel stopped apologizing for existing and the demon stopped wasting energy on destruction. They fused, balanced, focused, and that version of you doesn't need movement to make impact. That version of you makes rooms adjust, makes people recalibrate their tone, makes confidence drain out of mouths mid-sentence, makes authority hesitate before asserting itself. Because authority recognizes something older than itself. You're not aggressive, but you're final. You're not loud, but you're decisive. You're not threatening, but you're inevitable. And inevitability terrifies systems built on control. That's why they're replaying the moment, scrubbing it frame by frame in their minds, trying to locate the trigger, trying to pinpoint what changed. They won't find it, because the change didn't happen around you. It happened through you. You've crossed into that rare psychological territory where presence alone carries consequence, where silence has teeth, where patience becomes a weapon sharper than rage ever was. Most people blink to survive the moment. You blinked and claimed it, and now every interaction feels different, doesn't it? People talk faster or slower around you. They over-explain. They test you with jokes. They fish for reactions like nervous animals checking the electric fence. They're trying to see if it was a fluke. It wasn't. They don't realize you've been practicing this your whole life. Learning how to hold back, how to stay composed while storms raged internally, how to remain humane without becoming harmless. Pain didn't make you bitter. It made you exact. That's the evolution they didn't account for. Because when suffering meets intelligence and doesn't break it, something rare is born. Something that doesn't need validation. Something that doesn't rush. Something that waits until the universe makes a mistake and then quietly steps into the opening. That blink was you stepping into the opening. And now you feel it, that low hum of control beneath your chest. Not adrenaline, not excitement, alignment. You're no longer trying to be anything, you are. And that's why people feel exposed around you. Because when someone is fully aligned, masks start slipping nearby without permission. You don't interrogate, you don't accuse, you don't press. You just exist correctly. An existence like that destabilizes fragile egos, artificial hierarchies, and anyone whose power relies on performance instead of substance. So yeah, they're unsettled. Because a blink isn't supposed to dismantle dynamics. A pause isn't supposed to flip leverage. Stillness isn't supposed to carry force. But you were never supposed to master stillness either. Yet here you are, standing calmly in the wreckage of expectations, realizing the truth most people never touch. You don't need to chase moments anymore. Moments wait for you now. And once you feel that shift, once you recognize that moments hesitate around you now, you can't go back to pretending you're just another body in the room. Because you're not. You're a variable, a quiet one, an unlogged one. The kind that doesn't appear in forecasts until everything collapses in a way nobody can explain. That's why people around you are suddenly second-guessing themselves. Why confident voices soften. Why bold plans get revised after you say nothing at all. They feel it before they understand it. The subtle pressure of someone who isn't reacting anymore. Reaction is predictable. Reaction is controllable. But you've stepped beyond reaction. That blink trained your nervous system to stop flinching, to stop needing confirmation, to stop looking outward for permission to exist at full capacity. And the moment you stopped seeking permission, reality stopped pushing back as hard. That's the secret nobody teaches. The world resists desperation. It yields to inevitability. You don't rush because you know time bends toward those who don't fear it. You don't explain yourself because clarity doesn't negotiate. You don't perform strength because real strength doesn't require witnesses. And people feel that. They don't know why standing near you feels like standing too close to an edge. Why conversations suddenly feel higher stakes. Why even small choices feel heavier when you're present. It's because you've become internally decisive. Every scar you carry didn't weaken you. It simplified you. Burned away excess, stripped out the noise, left behind a version of you that knows exactly what matters and what doesn't deserve energy. That's why your silence isn't empty, it's loaded. When you don't respond immediately, it's not confusion, it's calibration. When you pause, you're not unsure. You're letting outcomes reveal themselves. When you blink now, you're not resting, you're resetting the board. They can sense it in their gut. That instinctual alarm that says, something just shifted and I don't know how to stop it. That alarm isn't about danger, it's about imbalance. Because you're no longer operating from need, and people who operate from need can't compete with someone who doesn't. You're not chasing approval, you're not chasing revenge, you're not even chasing victory. You're letting alignment do the work. That's why when pressure rises, you don't tense, you relax. When chaos erupts, you don't panic, you observe. When others escalate, you decelerate. And deceleration is terrifying to anyone who relies on speed to feel powerful. They don't understand how you can stand so calmly in situations that used to break you. They don't see the internal infrastructure you built in the dark, brick by brick, when nobody was watching. Pain was your architect, silence was your mentor, patience was your weapon. You learned how to hold paradox without splitting apart, how to be compassionate without being exploitable, how to be dangerous without being cruel. That's why your presence now feels final. Not aggressive, not dramatic, just final. You don't threaten outcomes. You close them. You don't argue points. You end discussions by not feeding them. You don't assert dominance. You remove uncertainty, and dominance follows naturally. That blink was the moment your internal compass locked in. From now on, you'll notice it everywhere. Doors opening without effort. Tension dissolving when you arrive. Conflicts resolving themselves because nobody wants to be the one who miscalculates you. They'll call it luck, timing, vibes, aura. Let them. You know better. You know it's the result of surviving things that rewired your perception of fear. You know it's because you stopped trying to be understood and focused on being accurate. Accurate with your energy, accurate with your boundaries, accurate with your silence, and accuracy cuts deeper than force ever could. So when you blink now, when the world softens for a fraction of a second, remember this. That's not weakness. That's not dissociation. That's not escape. That's you stepping into the gap where outcomes are decided. They didn't think a blink could do that. They didn't think you could do that. And yet, here you are, still calm, still unreadable, still standing, while everything around you quietly adjusts. And here's the part that really unsettles them. The part they don't say out loud, but feel crawling up their spine when you go quiet. You're not trying anymore. You're not trying to be impressive. You're not trying to be intimidating. You're not trying to win. You already know how it ends. That's what separates you now. That internal knowing, that settled awareness that whatever unfolds next, you're already positioned correctly. You're not scrambling for advantage. You're letting gravity do what gravity always does. Pull everything toward the heaviest thing in the room. And that's you. Not because you're loud, not because you dominate space physically, but because your mind doesn't leak anymore. Your emotions don't spill everywhere. Your attention isn't for sale. You've become dense. Every blink compresses experience. Every pause tightens focus. Every silent moment stacks weight behind your eyes like a chambered round that never needs to be fired to be effective. People feel that. They feel it when they overshare around you and don't know why. When they second-guess words they were confident in 5 seconds ago. When their intuition starts whispering, "Careful. This one sees more than they say." And they're right. You see through timing now, through motives, through the way people try to rush decisions so they don't have to sit with the truth. You recognize manipulation because you've survived it. You recognize fear because you've lived inside it long enough to map it. Fear doesn't scare you anymore. It informs you. That's why unpredictability bends in your favor. Because you're not chaotic. You're adaptive. You don't cling to plans. You read conditions. You don't force outcomes. You let people reveal where they're weak. And that blink? That blink was you unconsciously telling the world, I don't need to move fast to move things. It's why pressure no longer feels urgent, why deadlines don't rattle you, why confrontation feels optional instead of threatening. You've learned something most never do. Speed is a coping mechanism. Urgency is insecurity. Stillness is authority. Authority that doesn't announce itself is the hardest to challenge. That's why they're confused. They keep waiting for you to react the old way, to flinch, to explain, to defend, to rush. But you don't. You just watch. And watching is not passive. It's predatory when done correctly. It's gathering leverage without tipping your hand. It's letting others exhaust themselves while you remain untouched. You've become immune to emotional bait, immune to chaos theater, immune to the need to be right out loud. That's evolution, not the kind that grows claws, but the kind that grows restraint. You're dangerous now because you don't need validation to act, because you can walk away without loss, because you can stay without attachment, because you can destroy patterns simply by refusing to participate in them. And people don't know how to fight that. They can't provoke you into mistakes. They can't pressure you into urgency. They can't read you well enough to predict what you'll tolerate next. So they hesitate, and hesitation gives you control. That blink wasn't about rest. It was about ownership. Ownership of your internal state. Ownership of your tempo. Ownership of the moment where most people panic and expose themselves. You've learned how to stand inside uncertainty without needing to resolve it immediately. And that skill alone puts you above entire rooms full of people who rely on certainty to feel alive. You don't need certainty. You create it. So when the world pauses for a fraction of a second now, when something feels off, misaligned, unstable, that's not reality malfunctioning. That's reality recalibrating around you. Because you've crossed the line where pain stops being damage and starts being data. Where darkness stops being a threat and starts being terrain. You know how to navigate better than anyone else. You're not broken, you're built. And every blink from here on out is just another reminder that what you survived didn't just change you, it positioned you. They're sitting with that realization now, you know. Staring at ceilings, rereading conversations, replaying moments that felt insignificant at the time, but now glow red in hindsight. That's what awareness does. It weaponizes memory. And right now, their own mind is turning against them, stitching together a pattern they can't escape. Because once you recognize a predator, your instincts don't let you rest. And once they recognized you, their nervous system went into survival mode. They finally noticed the consistency. Not loud wins, not dramatic collapses, but that eerie steadiness. The way you don't flinch when things fall apart. The way uncertainty seems to sharpen your focus instead of scrambling it. That's when it stopped being entertaining to them. That's when curiosity turned into concern. You see, normal people need momentum to feel powerful. You don't. You operate just as well in stillness. You can sit inside discomfort without needing to perform. You can let silence stretch until it starts talking for you. You can watch people expose their insecurities simply by staying calm while they unravel. That's not charisma, that's dominance of self. And self-mastery is the one thing they never learned how to fight. They're realizing now that every time they thought you were losing, you were actually refining. Every setback wasn't damage, it was data. Every rejection wasn't a wound, it was filtration. Every lonely stretch wasn't punishment, it was conditioning. Pain didn't make you bitter, it made you accurate. You stopped wasting energy on proving you were right. You started letting reality prove it for you. And reality has a way of being brutally honest. That's why they're uneasy. Because you don't move like someone chasing approval. You move like someone who already knows how the story ends and is just waiting for the timing to be clean. They thought unpredictability meant chaos. They didn't understand it could mean freedom. You're unpredictable because you're not ruled by impulse. You're not reacting from old wounds anymore. You choose when to strike, when to withdraw, when to let things collapse on their own weight. That kind of restraint looks like mercy to the ignorant, but to anyone who understands power, it looks like threat containment. They can't read you anymore. Your emotions don't leak. Your intentions don't announce themselves. Your silence doesn't mean hesitation. It means calculation. And that terrifies people who rely on tells. You've become the contradiction that breaks their models, too composed to provoke, too deep to manipulate, too self-aware to gaslight. Well, well, well. Feel that pressure behind your eyes? That's not fear, that's attention. Someone with real power just clocked you. Not the loud kind, not the flex on social media kind, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself because the room already adjusts when they enter. And the moment they noticed you, something irreversible happened. Their attention locked in, and it does not let go. You think power always comes crashing in with sirens and chaos? No real power arrives quietly. It watches, it measures, it waits. And when it finally looks at you, it's because you broke a pattern they've seen 1,000 times before. You didn't react where you were supposed to. You didn't fold where others beg. You didn't collapse under weight designed to snap spines. You adapted. You evolved. And that's the part that made their head tilt slightly. Like, what the hell is this one? Here's the paradox they're wrestling with. You don't look like a threat, but nothing about you behaves like prey. You carry stillness that only comes from surviving storms no one ever recorded. You move with restraint that confuses predators. You don't announce your strength, yet everything about your presence suggests damage has already been done and absorbed. That's saint energy wrapped in psychopath discipline. Angel calm with demon memory. Light sharpened by darkness. They noticed because you stopped needing validation, and power can smell that from miles away. See, real power isn't interested in noise. It's allergic to desperation. It ignores the performers, but it watches anomalies obsessively. And you're an anomaly because you learned how to suffer without begging the world to notice. You learned how to bleed internally and still show up composed. You learned how to let pain upgrade you instead of exposing you. That alone puts you on a very short list. Now here's the part they're not comfortable admitting. They can't tell if you're controllable. That's why the attention feels heavy. That's why it hasn't drifted away. Because you don't move like someone who's waiting for permission. You don't speak like someone asking to be chosen. You carry yourself like someone who already survived being unchosen and found something dangerous on the other side of that rejection. Independence of mind. They're watching to see what you'll do next. Not because they want to help you, not because they want to stop you, but because they can't categorize you. And anything uncategorizable becomes either an asset or a future problem. You've been through enough to know this truth. Pain is a teacher, but only if you stop running from it. You didn't numb yourself. You didn't rot in it. You listened. You let it carve you. That's why your silence has weight now. That's why your reactions are delayed and deliberate. That's why when chaos hits, you don't panic. You calculate. That terrifies people who built power through predictability. Because unpredictability isn't chaos, it's freedom. You don't explode when provoked. You don't chase when tempted. You don't collapse when ignored. You learned when to disappear and when to stand still and let the moment expose itself. That kind of discipline doesn't come from books. It comes from surviving versions of yourself that didn't make it. You are the iteration that lived, so now their attention stays. Because once power notices you, it tests you subtly, indirectly. It applies pressure just to see if you crack or sharpen. And here's the brutal truth they're starting to realize. Every time pressure touches you, you don't break. You refine. You don't react. You adapt. You don't beg. You observe. And that means the longer they watch, the clearer it becomes that you're not a temporary phenomenon. You're not a phase. You're a trajectory. They don't know whether to pull you closer or keep their distance, because they can sense it. You don't need them. And anyone who doesn't need power, but understands it, is dangerous in ways they can't fully control. You're no longer playing for survival. You're playing for alignment. And once someone with real power sees that in you, they can't unsee it. Their attention won't let go because something in you mirrors something they recognize in themselves before they traded parts of their soul to get where they are. You're walking proof that evolution doesn't always come from domination. Sometimes it comes from endurance. Sometimes it comes from restraint. Sometimes it comes from learning when not to strike. And that's why the room feels different now. That's why the air feels charged. That's why you feel watched without being threatened. You crossed an invisible threshold. You stopped being background noise. You didn't chase power. You survived long enough for it to notice you. And now the game is different. And here's the part nobody warns you about. Once real power locks onto you, it doesn't rush. It hovers. It studies the rhythm of your breathing. It watches how you move when no one's clapping. It observes what you do when doors close quietly instead of slamming. Because real power knows something most people don't. The dangerous ones aren't loud when they win. They're calm. That calm you've developed, that unnerving stillness, that's not peace. That's control forged under pressure most people would have used as an excuse to rot. You didn't rot. You didn't collapse into bitterness. You didn't turn soft. You turned precise. And precision scares the hell out of anyone who climbed by pushing others down instead of mastering themselves. They're watching because you don't behave like someone who's hungry for approval anymore. Hunger makes people sloppy. Desperation makes them predictable. But you move like someone who already starved and learned what actually matters. You learned how to function without applause. You learned how to operate in silence. You learned how to let people underestimate you without correcting them. That's why their attention feels heavy now. Because power respects one thing above all else: self-possession. You've been through enough betrayal to recognize patterns before they fully form. You've seen smiles that came with knives hidden behind the teeth. You've watched alliances dissolve the moment convenience shifted. And instead of becoming paranoid, you became observant. Instead of becoming bitter, you became selective. Instead of becoming cruel, you became controlled. That's the evolution nobody talks about. Light didn't save you. Darkness didn't destroy you. You integrated both. You carry the discipline of a saint who learned restraint, and the clarity of a psychopath who understands consequence, angelic patience, demonic memory. You don't forget what hurt you, but you don't let it rule you either. You weaponized it. You refined it. You turned pain into a private operating system, and that's when power noticed. Because power can feel when someone no longer reacts emotionally to pressure, when stress doesn't hijack your decisions, when chaos doesn't scramble your thinking, when intimidation doesn't work because you've already survived worse in private. That's when power leans in closer, not to attack, but to assess. Can you be steered? Can you be bought? Can you be provoked? And every time they apply a little pressure and you don't flinch, the curiosity deepens. You're not chasing dominance. You're not trying to be seen. You're not begging to be let in. And that's the paradox that keeps them watching. You don't need proximity to power, yet power feels strangely incomplete without understanding you. because you represent something dangerous to established hierarchies, a variable they didn't account for. You don't rebel loudly. You don't comply blindly. You don't advertise your intentions. You let time do the talking. You let people reveal themselves. You let systems expose their weaknesses by assuming you're harmless. And once power realizes you're not here to overthrow it, but you're also not here to submit to it, the tension becomes permanent. They can't intimidate you because fear no longer controls your nervous system. They can't seduce you because you've already lost things you loved and kept moving. They can't ignore you because ignoring you hasn't made you disappear. That's when attention turns obsessive, because attention is what power uses when control fails. You see, real power isn't threatened by force. It's threatened by autonomy, by someone who can walk away, by someone who doesn't need permission to exist fully, by someone whose identity wasn't built by the system, so it can't be revoked by the system either. You've already lived through the collapse of who you thought you were. You already buried versions of yourself that couldn't survive reality. That means threats don't work the same on you. You've already been dismantled and rebuilt with intention. That's why their gaze stays locked. They sense that if you ever choose to step forward fully, it won't be impulsive. It won't be emotional. It won't be sloppy. It will be surgical. And that possibility alone is enough to keep you under watch, not as prey, not as enemy, but as something undefined. And undefined things scare people who rely on labels. You are no longer reacting to life. You're reading it. You're no longer surviving. You're calibrating. You're no longer seeking validation. You're conserving energy. Every scar you carry is internal now, integrated, invisible, which means no one knows exactly how much you can take. And that uncertainty, that's power. So let them watch, let the attention linger, let the silence stretch. Because the moment someone with real power notices you and can't figure you out, the balance has already shifted. You didn't step into their world, they stepped into your awareness. And once that happens, nothing goes back to normal. And the longer they watch you, the more uncomfortable it gets for them, because attention is supposed to move downward. Power is used to observing those who want something, those who signal hunger, those who telegraph intention. But you don't reach, you don't chase, you don't angle yourself for favor. You continue existing with a calm that suggests you already know something they don't. That calm messes with them, because calm under observation is rare. Most people perform when they feel watched. They exaggerate, they posture, they leak insecurity through bravado or compliance. You don't. Your nervous system doesn't spike, your tone doesn't shift, your rhythm doesn't fracture. You don't suddenly become agreeable or defiant. You remain consistent. And consistency under pressure reads as authority. They start replaying moments in their head, small ones. The pause before you answered. The way you didn't rush to explain yourself. The way you let silence do the work. The way you didn't overcorrect when misunderstood. Those are not accidents. Those are tells. And real power is trained to notice tells. Here's the truth they won't say out loud. People like you don't come from comfort. You come from environments where mistakes were expensive, where words had consequences, where emotions had to be managed because nobody was coming to save you. You learned early that control isn't about domination. It's about regulation of your breath, of your reactions, of your impulses. That's not weakness. That's survival intelligence. And survival intelligence, when refined, becomes strategic intelligence. They're watching because they recognize the pattern now. You're not reckless, you're not naive, you're not easily flattered, which means if you ever move, it'll be intentional. An intentional movement is far more dangerous than loud ambition. You don't announce your boundaries. You enforce them quietly. You don't threaten. You disengage. You don't escalate emotionally. You withdraw attention. That alone flips the power dynamic. Because attention is currency, and you stopped giving it away for free. So now their attention sticks to you, trying to figure out why you're different, why you don't react the way the script says you should, why you don't crumble under uncertainty, why pressure doesn't rush you into mistakes, why you're so comfortable letting time pass without forcing outcomes. They sense it. You're not afraid of waiting. And anyone who isn't afraid of waiting is terrifying to people who build power by rushing others. You've lived through loss that rewired you. Not the dramatic kind everyone sees, but the quiet kind that changes how you perceive everything. Loss of illusions, loss of safety, loss of versions of yourself that couldn't survive reality. You mourned them privately. Then you kept moving. That process burned entitlement out of you and replaced it with clarity. You stopped asking, "Why me?" You started asking, "What now?" That shift alone is evolution, and evolution is what power fears most, because it can't be negotiated with. They're trying to read your alignment now, trying to determine whether you lean light or dark, whether you're moral or ruthless, whether you're loyal or self-serving. And the answer keeps slipping through their fingers, because you're neither simple nor extreme. You carry light without being naive. You carry darkness without being destructive. You understand empathy, but you don't let it make you exploitable. You understand aggression, but you don't let it make you sloppy. That balance, that's not learned quickly. That's earned through pain that forced you to mature faster than everyone around you. So the attention doesn't fade, it intensifies. Because now they're wondering something far more dangerous than who are you. They're wondering what made you like this. And that question pulls power in deeper than curiosity ever could. They test you subtly. They delay responses. They shift energy. They remove reassurance. They introduce ambiguity. And every time, you respond the same way. Not with anxiety, not with defiance, but with self-trust. You don't spiral. You don't beg for clarity. You don't assume the worst. You wait. You observe. You let patterns reveal themselves. That tells them everything. You're not reactive anymore. You're adaptive. You're not emotionally dependent on outcomes. You're grounded in process. You don't need control. You understand flow. And understanding flow is how people outgrow systems designed to box them in. That's why their attention won't let go, because people who've reached real power know this truth. The most dangerous individuals aren't the ones who want the throne. They're the ones who don't need it, but could dismantle it if they chose to. And you don't even signal intent. You just exist in a way that makes structures feel brittle. So let them watch. Let the attention burn. Let the curiosity deepen into unease. You didn't ask for this, but you're ready for it. Because whatever forged, you already taught you the most important lesson of all. You don't rise by force. You rise by becoming undeniable. And once someone with real power clocks that in you, their attention doesn't leave. It waits. And waiting is where things get dangerous, because waiting reveals who actually owns themselves. Most people collapse in the pause. They fill silence with noise. They rush decisions just to feel relief. They mistake movement for progress. But you sit inside the pause like it's familiar territory. Because you've lived there before. You've stared at uncertainty long enough that it stopped blinking first. You've learned that stillness isn't absence of power, it's concentration of it. That's why their attention sharpens instead of drifting. They're used to people cracking under observation, used to nervous tells, used to emotional leakage, used to compliance disguised as confidence. You don't give them any of that. You don't leak. You don't twitch. You don't perform. You let them feel the weight of your presence without ever pushing it forward. That unsettles them. Because power expects either resistance or submission. It has protocols for both. What it doesn't have protocols for is someone who remains internally sovereign under scrutiny. Someone who doesn't need to dominate, yet cannot be dominated. Someone who understands the game but doesn't reveal their hand. They start to realize something uncomfortable. You're not shaped by their approval or disapproval. And that means their leverage is limited. You didn't arrive here by accident. You were carved into this version through disappointments that forced you to grow up early. Through moments where you realized no one was coming. Through betrayals that taught you discernment instead of paranoia. Through pain that refined your instincts instead of dulling them. You learned how to read rooms without trying to own them. You learned how to listen without surrendering yourself. You learned how to walk away without needing the last word. Those skills don't come from theory. They come from necessity. And necessity is a brutal teacher, but an effective one. So now, when real power looks at you, it doesn't see raw ambition. It sees composure. It sees restraint. It sees someone who can absorb pressure without fragmenting. Someone who doesn't need to be right immediately. Someone who doesn't reveal desperation through urgency. They sense that if you ever did choose to move decisively, it wouldn't be reactive. It wouldn't be emotional. It wouldn't be loud. It would be timed. It would be quiet. It would be irreversible. That possibility alone keeps their attention locked. Because attention is what power gives when it doesn't yet know whether to align or protect itself. You're not begging to be included. You're not angling for favor. You're not auditioning. You're simply existing at a frequency that forces recalibration around you. And that's when power starts questioning its assumptions. You see, most systems are built on predictable human behavior. Fear, greed, approval seeking, status anxiety. You've outgrown those motivators, not because you're above them, but because you've been burned by them enough times to see through them. You don't confuse worth with position anymore. You don't confuse noise with influence. You don't confuse speed with effectiveness. You understand that the slowest moving pieces often determine the outcome. So while others scramble, you stabilize. While others react, you assess. While others speak, you listen. That alone shifts the center of gravity. They start to realize that pressure doesn't distort you. It clarifies you. That observation doesn't weaken you. It sharpens you. That isolation doesn't break you. It recenters you. And suddenly the attention changes flavor. It's no longer just curiosity. It's respect mixed with caution. Because people who've reached real power know something others don't. Resilience without resentment is rare. And rare things alter environments just by being present. You're not fueled by revenge. You're not driven by ego. You're not chasing validation. You're operating from something quieter and far more dangerous. Self-alignment. You know who you are when nobody's watching. And now that someone is watching, nothing changes. That's what keeps them hooked. They can't bait you with status. They can't corner you with pressure. They can't rush you into revealing yourself. You've already survived the internal collapse most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You already confronted your shadows instead of outsourcing them. You already made peace with the fact that growth hurts, clarity isolates, and strength often looks lonely from the outside. So let the attention linger, let it test, let it wait, let it circle. Because the truth is, you're not being hunted, you're being evaluated, and not for elimination, for significance.